And there it is.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special Wednesday edition of the End of the Night on the Indie Brigade. I'm joined here by my trusty cohort, Joe Ridgely, and a living legend himself, Mr. George C. Romero. Mr. Romero, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, as great as anybody could possibly be under the current conditions that we are living under. But I'm chipper and I'm excited, and we're just going to sit back and have fun tonight and try to entertain everybody who's stuck at home just like we are.
I think it's a great episode. I think it's a cool thing you pulled together, and I'm happy you're doing it on a Wednesday off night. I think it's a super cool idea, and I'm super happy that your guest has agreed and is here. So what did Holly say?
Just like Zac to make a girl wait. They were blaming me for being late, so there are a few.
What's up, Jack?
I will let everybody know out there that Joe had absolutely nothing to do with us running a little bit late tonight. It was we were experiencing a technical difficulty, just like channels did back when you were a kid, and that little thing would go across the bottom when your images were all wacky. But yes, tonight we have an incredible show. In a few minutes, we're going to be joined by pop culture icon. Some would even consider him a living legend. Zac Galligan will be joining us tonight. That's where you guys chime in with something.
That is freaking amazing.
It's a pretty awesome night. He's a pretty great guy, and I'm super excited. Like I said, I'm happy you're doing the show tonight. But you know what? I did want to say something, that even though it was a technical glitch and it was not Joe's fault, we still have a policy here, David.
Yes, I know. I'll blame vitamin water.
Hey, man, don't plug them. Yeah, that could be a sponsor, a potential sponsor.
Another great surprise that we have tonight on the show, and the show is known for its crazy surprises, is that one of our regulars, lovingly known in my household as Uncle Scott Schiaffo, the Chuli's Gum Guy, will be joining us tonight for the second half of the show. Hi, Kylie. How are you? One of my very first fans. She was a little girl who came out to a screening of Mr. Hush in the Hollywood Theater. So she's a great kid. Scott, how are you? Scott Schiaffo, the Chuli's Gum Guy himself, will be joining us on the second half of the show to ask the great Zac Galligan a couple questions. And so that's great. Joe Castro, amazing special effects makeup artist. Thank you for joining us tonight.
What's up, Joe? I love Scott. I love that he's a regular part of your show. I love the chemistry you guys have. I think it's awesome. Hey, there's another Scott that we should talk about real quick who popped up. Scott Williamson. Actually, there's a bunch of people doing some stuff to help Scott out right now, and from the tornado thing. Yeah. Right.
So Scott
Williamson.
So Scott Williamson was affected by the tornadoes in Texas?
Correct.
Yeah.
And he lost his home. He lost everything. Tornado landed square on top of him.
Oh, geez.
And his mother lost their homes.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, thank God he's safe. And if there's any way that we can get information across the bottom of the screen, if Scott wants to post it, if there's any way that our audience could help Scott in his time of need, I would be honored for everybody out there who's watching to please give Scott a helping hand. There's
a bunch of people doing auctions and stuff to help him try to raise some money to get back on his feet. And it's really cool to see the brigade coming together like that.
And you know what's awesome? The most important thing is that he's here to tell us that everything's all right. He made it through. Thank God.
Right. Oh, we're being corrected. He's in Mississippi.
He's in Mississippi.
Yes.
Oh, Mississippi.
My apologies to both Mississippi and Texas for making the gratuitous error I just made.
I think I made it too. So,
okay.
And apologies all around.
All right.
It's been a crazy week. Look, there's a GoFundMe for Scott.
It looks like if you go to the GoFundMe.com and look for Scott Williamson lost all in a tornado, you'll be able to find it. And if you can click on this link directly below, that'll be another way to help Scott and his family out. So
it is in the comments.
Yes.
Thank you, Samantha.
Boom.
Now, another thing, George and Joe, that I've been doing since we've all been quarantined is I've been catching up on like every stupid movie, TV show that I have missed.
Is this going to be about the Waltons again?
I'm not. I promise you, I won't talk about the Waltons. John Boy left, and I am off Walton's Mountain now. Okay.
Fair enough.
This is a little segment I was doing on my personal page. I was doing happy hour with Dave Madison, 5:00 every day for a week, where friends and family would come on and we drink heavily and just not worry about what's going on in the world. And it was a little segment I did that everybody found extremely exciting and they had a good time with. Was I would suggest things to watch during this time that we all have downtime. And I just want to suggest one movie tonight. This might be an ongoing segment on this Dopey Show, but I think this is a really cool film, and I don't know if many people seen it. It's called Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. Have you guys, Joe, George, have you guys seen this movie?
Negative.
Dark Knight of the Scarecrow was made for TV in the 80s, maybe the late 70s, and starred Larry Drake and let me get my old man glasses on for a minute. It starred Larry Drake and Charles Dunning, and it is truly, truly a masterpiece in suspenseful horror. It's well acted. It's a great movie. If you've watched Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, please leave in the comments what you thought about it. And if you haven't seen Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, thank you, Scott. I agree. If you haven't seen Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, check it out while you guys are all locked up like I am. Thank you, Kylie. I think it's a great film too. All right, now they're both looking at me like, "Boy, does this guy ever shut up?" Does he
No, I'm actually looking to order them. I'm actually looking to order a copy of the movie.
Oh no, it's George. If you don't like that movie, send me the bill and I'll pay for it.
I'm surprised that I haven't seen it. It's not too often that I get stumped, but that's one I don't remember. So maybe
that's a cult classic.
I give that movie a solid 9 out of 10, which is really
good deal.
That's up there with made for TV movies like what the Night of the Gargoyles or Gargoyles.
Oh yeah, I remember that Gargoyle movie with and Trilogy of Terror, of course, which was like the best.
They still show Trilogy of Terror. It's on like every free service out there. It's on the TV channels still show Trilogy of Terror in the middle of the night.
Hi Mia. One of the things I saw at one of all the conventions I do, they have that little doll, the actual doll, that voodoo doll, I guess it is.
Yeah.
They actually sell that thing, and like the cheap bastard me, I haven't bought it yet, but I should because I want it. I'm just afraid that if I bring it home, the chain's gonna fall off and chase me and my wife around the house. All right.
Hey,
without further. Sorry?
Oh, I just realized there's a whole bunch of people. Every time we do this, it always defaults to the private chat and the live, and then I remember to click the live comments, and then I'm always surprised that there's like tons of comments. People are present.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Just wanted to acknowledge everybody's presence.
I know. Thank you for joining us. I mean, there's a lot of time when us three morons are just talking to just us three morons after the show. That's what people don't know is that like after the show, especially on Friday night, George does his show and then I do my show, and my show ends at midnight, and then Joe, George, and I sit on here conversing like three mental patients to usually about 2:00 in the morning. But it's one of the things that it's one of the things that I actually look forward to now. So
yeah, me too. Yeah. And then you go and watch the Waltons, and then I go and I watch MASH,
and then I go edit stuff.
Come on, we know you're watching Little House on the Prairie. All right, without further ado, this icon has actually been waiting in our green room for us to stop with our banter. So without further ado, a living legend, truly an icon in both modern cinema, regular cinema, and horror cinema. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to introduce to you the great Zac Galligan. Hey, Zac.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So I managed to fix it. It was just a simple thing. I had to fix it in the browser and not on my computer, so we're good.
You actually sound like you're ready to DJ a show on Sirius XM. That's how good you sound.
Oh, good. Excellent.
So how are you doing in these odd, strange, bizarre times we live in, Zac?
Well, I'm actually a fairly, I wouldn't say I'm a loner, but I definitely like my private time. So when I'm not doing conventions or working and stuff like that, I pretty much live a very quiet life here in Georgia, with my cats and my chess set and my movie collection and Spotify and the library. And so my three favorite things to do in life are listen to music and read books and watch film and television and stuff like that. I'm an experienced guy, so I'm not the guy who goes out and polishes his Mercedes and takes it out to the track for a spin. I'm much more the guy that sits down and reads the history of the Civil War or something like that. So it's been, quarantine is not that different really for me. So it's just kind of like more of the same. And I'm fortunate enough to live in a nice house with a nice backyard. So I don't really feel cooped up. And the weather down here outside of Atlanta has just been absolutely spectacular. So it's been, considering it's been okay.
So you're getting to sit back and just kind of watch the world burn around you. That's awesome.
Well, the thing is that also this whole January to April tends to be arguably my slowest time of the year. Mm-hmm. Just because the convention season really kind of heats up, especially for me, like August to December, especially with Gremlins being, or I should say, morphing into a Christmas movie. So I'm very busy around Christmas, as you could probably understand. So this period being kind of dead, it feels, and full of inactivity, feels pretty familiar to me, quite honestly. So, it's, though I will say this, I did, since we're on a, I don't know if you call it a horror show, but since it's certainly a horror friendly show, I managed to squeeze in a new horror movie this January, which is kind of cool. And I can tell you guys a little bit about that if you want to.
Absolutely. I promise you we'll get to your entire cinematic. But first, I was very rude. I want to introduce to you the gentleman with the hat is our amazing producer and also a co-host of George and I. That's Mr. Joe Ridgely. Joe, say hi to Zac.
Hi, Zac. Pleasure to see you.
And the gentleman with the glasses
up,
is the founder of the entire network, the son of the iconic George Romero, and a great and talented filmmaker in and of his own, Mr. George C. Romero.
Nice to meet you, Zac.
Nice to meet you, George. Are you in Pittsburgh as well?
No, not anymore. I'm in Kentucky.
Okay, cool.
Pittsburgh to LA for like 15 years almost, and then back this way to Kentucky. So I'm actually not that far from Georgia, and it's great. I love it. So thanks for coming on the network tonight. Thank you for doing David's show, and it's a pleasure to meet you. It's an honor to have you, and welcome to the Indie Brigade, man.
Thank you very much. You guys were way too effusive in your praise on the introduction. I was like, did they have someone on before me? Because that ain't me.
No, don't sell yourself short, Zac. You're an incredible actor, and you're incredibly kind to your fans and to everyone. I had the honor of doing some shows with Zac. Sat right next to him at some conventions, and I see the way he treats his fans, and they're very lucky to have you to be a fan of yours because you're a very decent guy. So my first question for you, Zac, is what was it like growing up in New York City and developing your love for acting in New York City? And were you like originally attracted to film or stage plays?
Well, the interesting thing is that as far as starting acting, I really kind of started it. I guess I started in school in Manhattan, and did do school plays. But then when I hit around 14 or 15, I started doing musicals at my summer camp, which was like up near Woodstock, New York. And so I did the classic kind of musicals that you do, you know, Jesus and Godspell and Danny Zuko and Grease and Pippin. You know, you're talking about the basic, the big three of late 70s, early 80s plays, stuff like that. And it was funny because I thought I could really sing quite well. And I recently saw some footage of it and I was terrible. I was so bad. It was just amazing. But I guess I just kind of, I had that kind of ability to just throw myself out there and take big risks and chances like you kind of need to do if you're an actor. So I did the camp plays, and then I started doing more school plays, like I just said, like Pippin and Carousel and whatnot. And then that graduated kind of into, in my senior year, doing stuff like Much Ado About Nothing, where I played Benedict, and, you know, just starting to really do the theater thing. But I really think it's my whole career is an accident of the school I went to. I went to a place called Collegiate School at 77th and Broadway. And to be perfectly honest, it was kind of like a hoity-toity, you know, jacket and tie, all boys school. I mean, you know, some of the people I went to school with were like, you know, John F. Kennedy Jr. and actually David Duchovny and Jason Begay. It's very weird how many actors came out of this one little 4-year high school class, like almost nobody else. But in that 4-year section from 1978 to 1982, you know, you had me and Jason Begay and David Duchovny and Billy Wirth from The Lost Boys. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's only 150 kids in our high school. So it's a very, very kind of random assortment. But anyway, so I was doing these school plays, and people kind of have to just get a brief little background on what Hollywood was like in 1980. For whatever reason, there were very, very few young actors. There was like Robbie Benson, you know, and Baio, and that was like it. It was almost like they weren't really doing movies about kids during the 70s. The 70s was all about, you know, Warren Beatty and Burt Reynolds and Star Wars and stuff like that. And there weren't really a lot of young, you know, movies about young people. So the first thing I remember is since this is all a film buffy kind of a thing, it's 1979. They had a casting director come in for a movie called Over the Edge, which eventually discovered Matt Dillon, Vincent Spano. So they were the first two out of the New York system. And then the next movie that came in, and I didn't get to try out for that. And I can remember seething. I was like, why do they get to try? And I don't get to try out for it, you know, because I'm like 15 years old and I'm chomping at the bit. And then the first movie I did ever get to try out for is a movie called Taps with George C. Scott, Timothy Hutton. Mm-hmm. And also Tom Cruise and Sean Penn. That's really where they first sort of got introduced in Taps. And then you saw Cruise again in a small part in a movie called Endless Love with Brooke Shields. Because he was based out of New Jersey. He's a Jersey actor. I used to see Tom Cruise at auditions like in the very, very early 80s when he was just sort of like a struggling actor. That's how long I've been doing this thing. So I tried out for Taps, and I was up for the same part as Sean Penn, and I didn't get it. But Shirley Rich, who was the casting director, I didn't know this at the time. Casting directors tend to talk to each other. So when Juliet Taylor, who was another casting director, came in, she was trying to do this other movie. She came in and she's like, when she called Shirley Rich, is like, when I go to collegiate school, who should I see? And so Shirley Rich was like, well, you should see this person and that person. So now, without even knowing, I'd sort of been put on this kind of like small little list of like, you should check out this guy. Meanwhile, I'm 16 years old. You know, I'm a 10th grader. Mm-hmm. So Julia Taylor comes in and has me try out for this movie called No Small Affair. I don't get it. Matthew Broderick gets it. Sally Field gets it. And then that whole production gets shut down because the director, Martin Ritt, has a heart attack during shooting and gets remade in 1985 with Demi Moore and John Grier. So it's just, finally for me, the real big break, the life changer for me was that Julia Taylor liked what I did for No Small Affair, came back to me about 10 months later, in March of 1981, and was like, there's this movie we're doing called Tempest, And it was a remake of sort of a modern day remake of Shakespeare's Tempest, John Cassavetes, Jenna Rollins, Raul Julia, and Susan Sarandon, and directed by the great Paul Mazursky.
Wow.
So my maybe my second audition in my lifetime, I go in and they have me read. I walk in and it's Paul Mazursky and Susan Sarandon. And I'm like, I've seen Rocky Horror Picture Show like 50 times. And I'm like this, what? Are you kidding me? And she's there. I can even tell you what she's wearing. She's wearing like a leotard, and she had like remember in the 80s they had those leg warmers that women wore all the time, like leg warmers up to her knees, like a leotard, right? Leg warmers up to her knees and everything like that. She's all, and her hair was all perfect, and she had the cleavage and the décolletage and everything. And I was 17, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And the first person they had me read with was an actress named Phoebe Cates.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, I know this girl from 17 magazine. She's so pretty. This is ridiculous. So long story short, I came very close to that movie and I didn't get it. But Julia Taylor eventually called me at home and told me I didn't get it. She said, do you want to do this for a living? And I said, I mean, I love acting. I'd like to try, but I mean, I don't really know if I could do this for a living. I mean, she goes, I think you really just need more auditions. And if you got more auditions, then I think people would really, respond to you. I think you just need more chances. I was like, well, that's great. Well, how do I get more chances? She's like, well, you get an agent. I'm like, well, what's an agent? She's like, that's the person who gets you more chances. I was like, well, how do I get one? She goes, well, most people, it takes a very, very long time to get an agent, but is your mom nearby? I think I hear her in the background. I was like, yeah. He goes, she says, could you put your mom on the phone? I'm like, yeah. So I hand the phone to my mom. My mom gets on the phone. She goes like this. What? Okay. I see. All right, then. She hands me the phone and she looks at me and she goes, you have 1 year, and walks out the door. And I get on the phone and she's like, get a pen and pencil. And I wrote down, she gave me the name of the 3 best agents in Manhattan. I took meetings with all 3 of the agents, and then I picked the one I wanted.
Wow.
And that's how I got started.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. I got my first part in 30 days. I got my first lead in a movie in 10 months. And then I got Gremlins in less than 2 years after I started. So it was just kind of like fing, fang, fum, foom. It was crazy.
Well, George and I have to drop out. I do have to put up one comment from Joe Castro, if I may. Tell Zach I saw the chair. He was awesome in that. Bravo.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thanks. That's cool. That was a very a dark movie and a dark shoot, but obviously working with the great and late Rowdy Roddy Piper is definitely a career highlight. That guy was amazing. Yeah. Amazing guy. And a fine actor too.
So David, do me a favor, try to pay attention to some of the comments, and I am going to bow down. And
Zach, pleasure to meet you. David, I'll catch you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
So, Zach, now that it's just you and I.
Yeah.
1984 comes around, if I'm correct. And you get the starring role in the motion picture Gremlins.
It was actually the year before. Getting it is actually 83.
Okay, 83. I guess you started principal in probably 83 because it was a big movie. Mm-hmm. And you're a young actor, you're a kid, and you're working with the likes of the great Joe Dante and Phoebe Cates, as I recall, was your co-star. How did it feel to all of a sudden be thrusted not only into a major motion picture, but to be the leading star, the guy who carries the whole movie?
Well, I mean, wow. I mean, how do you... It's very, very hard to put into words. I guess you have to start from getting the part. You get the part, and there's a feeling of such total shock. And, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't know I mean, I pretty much knew the day I got that role. I was down in Florida, actually. I was in Fort Lauderdale. I was about to start a big, wild, drunken spring break kind of thing. I had just landed. And I got the call that I got the movie. And I had to fly back the next day because they needed me to read the script, and they were not going to send it because it was like a special copy. Actually still have the copy. It was a special copy. I had my name stamped on it and a certain code number and everything like that. And I had to read the script, and then I had to accept the part. Oh, no, wait a second. I had to accept the part without reading the script. So I had to say yes without even knowing what I was getting myself into. So I said yes, but then I had to fly home the next day, and I can't remember why. I had to sign all sorts of paperwork and whatnot. So the Fort Lauderdale trip did not happen. But, and it was weird because I was with like 3 or 4 other guy friends of mine from high school, and they were all ready to go out, chase women and drink beer and everything like that, and which they went and did. But I had to get up at like 6 a.m. the next morning and get back on a flight. So they went off without me and left me alone at this little motel outside of Fort Lauderdale called the Dolphin Motel. And I'm sitting in this crappy little room. We were kids and we were broke. The room probably was $35 or something like that back in 1983. And I was pacing so bad. And so I went outside and I just sat on the beach. And I just can remember the sun going down and the waves crashing on the beach and like the seagulls flying over me. And in the distance, I watched this tanker go all across the horizon, and just staring off into space thinking, you know what? My life is never, ever going to be the same. Even if the movie bombs, I know my life is never going to be the same. It just feels like a juncture point where my life splits off and goes into this direction. And I was, to be perfectly honest, I was right. And it's been a pretty wild ride for the last 30 some odd years, 37 years. It's been pretty crazy, really.
If you had to do it all again, Zac, would you do it?
Well, obviously I'd probably correct a few things, but and look back at some of the mistakes and errors you made. But as I get older, you kind of wonder whether you really make mistakes or whether that's just sort of how it was meant to be. Because I have a lot of friends of mine, well, not a lot, but certainly a handful of friends of mine who, who aren't with us anymore. And you sort of wonder, if I'd booked that one extra movie, or if I'd said that one extra thing and gotten this thing and blown up, or if I'd made different choices on my Back to the Future audition. And then, so therefore I'd have Gremlins and Back to the Future back to back like that. And maybe I would have become this huge, Brad Pitt type thing that would have wrapped himself around a telephone pole in 1991. And you'd be talking about me like you talk about somebody else.
Right.
So you just don't, at a certain point you have to be just kind of, I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm just super grateful and happy for what has happened, as opposed to going back and going woulda, shoulda, coulda, because there's no point to that, really.
Well, that's so awesome. I never even knew that you were auditioned for Back to the Future. Did you audition for the Marty McFly part?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I auditioned. I probably, this is probably true about most actors. If you're an actor, like even right now, and you're in some major hit, you're going to be put on lists and you're going to be seen and try out for just about everything that you're even conceivably right for the next 18 to 24 months. And so for me, basically from 1983, I would say 1986, maybe even a little later, 87, I was up for every conceivable movie. Like, people be like, were you up for Platoon? I was like, yeah. I came really close for Platoon. Did you go up for St. Elmo's Fire? I was like, I screen tested for St. Elmo's Fire. I was making out with Ali Sheedy the entire time during my screen test. I tried out for The Breakfast Club. I tried out for Back to the Future. I tried out for I screen tested for the Rocketeer, for the Bill Campbell, for the Rocketeer, for the Bill Campbell part. I mean, actually, you can say really for 6 years, 7 years, I was basically up for almost everything. The problem that happens, and this is what most people watching this don't know, but I was an acting teacher at NYU for 10 years until 2015, 2006, 2015. One of the things that happens to you as an actor is that what I call, I guess you could call it 22. When 22 happens to you, everything changes. And the reason why is because you start out at 17 and you have a certain amount of competition. And then when you hit 22, everybody your age gets out of college. And what happens is like literally in the space of 2 months, so it's April, and you go in, you go, oh, look, there's so-and-so, I beat him. Oh, there's so-and-so, I beat him. Oh, no, those 3 guys, those are knuckleheads. I can beat those guys. And you're all cocky and everything like that. And you do beat them. 2 months later, it's June 15th. And you go into some audition and suddenly there's, who's this guy? And who's that guy? And who are and 4, 6 people get out of the elevator. You're like, who are these people? And it's like, dude, that's everybody who just got out of college who's now your competition. And some of them have training and you don't. I didn't have any training. Mm-hmm. And so from about 1986 to 1988, I got my clock cleaned by all of these people that I'd never worked with before. And it's like there's a thin band of competition till you're 22. And then it goes like this. Oh my God, I'm competing against all these people. You know what I mean? Instead of just this little narrow band. So that's what happens with a lot of young actors too, is that they can take the mild competition, but then when you're up against 350 brand new people who are never been seen before and are young and fresh and hot, you're like, I got to retool everything. And that's what I eventually did in 1990. I was like, I'm falling behind big time. And so I started taking my first serious concerted acting class. And I'd moved to Los Angeles by then and studied for like literally next 6 or 7 years to try and make up for lost time and try and stick with the competition.
Oh, well, it's amazing because you would think that after your turn in Gremlins and in all the films that you had done up to that point, that would be more of your calling card than what was on like your ability, like your schooling or your background.
You would think that, but really, what's so funny is the whole idea of like, well, he's a name. Let's offer him something. That really didn't happen until the early to mid 90s. So what people always find hard to believe, people are like, well, how many offers did you get after Gremlins? You know what the answer is? 0. I didn't get a single offer after Gremlins, not one, nothing.
It's astonishing.
And even after surviving, it put me and Molly Ringwald on the cover of People magazine. Still didn't get any offers. It wasn't really an offer-based business until you were like really huge, like legitimately huge. And of course, one of the things about Gremlins is, and it's true, and you're not going to say, oh, everyone rushed out that movie to see this unknown guy. They rushed out of the movie because it was a Spielberg movie. So right. I don't get any of the credit for it. But someone like War Games, Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, they get credit because who's rushing out to see a John Badham movie? Nobody even knows. I mean, John Badham's a terrific director. Don't get me wrong, John, hire me. But the fact of the matter is nobody's rushing out to see a John Badham movie. Nobody even knew who John Badham was. So Hollywood executives would be like, well, I guess it's got to be the 2 kids. What else can it be? I don't know. How about great direction, great script, cool effects?
No, absolutely. Ron Purdy, who's watching us, has a question for you. He wants to know, you're most known for Billy Peltzer in Gremlins. Is that a blessing or a curse?
It's really funny because the way the feelings I have for the entire Gremlins franchise is, and I always compare it to the Beatles. Not that I'm comparing myself to the Beatles in any way, shape, or form, but you see like George Harrison, for example, who I loved. I was a big Beatles fan and George Harrison fan. He went through a long period where he was just kind of like. And even John Lennon, they were sort of like, oh yeah, back when we were in the Beatles and it was so great. And so they started having like they almost got sort of annoyed by it. It seems like the only person who wasn't annoyed by it was McCartney. But George Harrison was like, he even wrote a song called When We Was Fab, and it was kind of snarky about like being in the Beatles. And you want to grab him and go, dude, you're in the Beatles, bro. Don't be upset about it. You're in the Beatles. But he was tired of being a Beatle. He was tired of the whole thing. So I went through a period of what I refer to fondly as gremlin fatigue. I had like late 90s gremlin fatigue, where I was just like, shut up about crap, and I have this one hilarious thing that happened to me that really sums it up. I'd been out partying all night. I was completely hungover, and I did my usual ritual where I would get up. I was just living in Los Angeles on Stanley Avenue, and I got up and went down to the Buzz Coffee on the corner, got a coffee, and I would always walk across the street. Remember that in LA, they still had to put the quarter in the little newspaper thing, and you pull it down.
Open up, yeah.
You could take like all 17 newspapers if you wanted to. You just take one newspaper out like that. So I'm at the vending machine, the newspaper vending machine, and put the quarter in like that. And out of the corner of my eye, I'm standing on Beverly Boulevard. I see a car, and I don't know why I looked at it. The car is coming towards me like pretty fast, and I can see that someone's rolling down a window really fast. And the car goes right by me. And as it goes by me, they go, bright light, bright light. And I was like this, hungover with my hair like sticking up like alfalfa. You know what I mean? I'm just like baked and everything like that. And I'm just like, really? Really? You're doing the Billy Peltzer thing at 11 a.m. when I'm hungover? Just want to read my coffee and drink my drink. So
you just said they want to read my coffee.
Yeah. just want to read my coffee. So that was the last straw, and I was like, I'm sick of the Gremlins, you're taking chickens, it's Billy Peltzer, this, your motherfucker, So I was like, and then a beautiful thing happened, which is the internet, what we're on right now. And everybody kind of got together for 5 or 6 years and talked about movies on the internet. And by 2005, 2006, they had kind of achieved a consensus. And the consensus was the 5 or 6 greatest movies of the 80s are Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop.
Sweet.
Indiana Jones. And suddenly I was like, holy shit, I'm in that list. Like, I'm in one of the best movies of all time. And the other thing that happened that is very, it's very self-serving, but actors do have egos and a desire for recognitions. One of the reasons we get into this is that, like, up until 2005, people would see me and go like this, I know you. You're the Gremlin dude, right? Are you the dude from Gremlins? I go, yeah, I'm the dude from Gremlins, bro. He's like, dude, that's insane, bro. Dude, hey, man, this is a dude from Gremlins. So I get that, right? So then eventually what happened is, the thing about the internet that's so interesting is so much has to do with reading. You have to read articles, you read Twitter, you read your phone. People are furiously scrolling on their phone. Even on Instagram, you read the captions. So people are constantly, it goes from a visual thing like a movie to so much more. People don't realize how much they read when they're on the internet, articles and everything like that. And eventually what happened is, after 10 years of this, I went from being the dude from Gremlins. People come up to me. I'll never forget it. Like, the first time I think it happened, I was in England. People come up to me and go, excuse me, are you Zac Galligan? And I go, I was like, what? Yes. Why? Do I know you? Did I do something wrong? Please don't arrest me. And they were like, no, we're just a big fan. I thought it was delightful performances that you've done, Mr. Galligan. And so basically, since about 2007, people know my name, which they really didn't do, if you stop and think about it, for about 23 years. That's a long time. Imagine this for people home. Here's an exercise. You will eventually be recognized the way you want to be. People will eventually know your name in 2043.
Nice. I hope to be alive in 2043.
Think about that.
Before we bring the great Scott Schiaffo on, I have 2 very quick questions for you.
Sure.
growing up, and one of the films that inspired me to be a filmmaker is, and I think they're just wonderful films. They're really great films, and they're tremendously underrated, are the 2 Waxwork movies that you did.
Okay.
What was it like, A, to work? Did you get, I don't remember, I don't recall, did you actually have scenes with Patrick Macnee?
I did. Yes, certainly at the end of the movie, in the Waxwork, where spoiler, David Warner falls into the wax at the end. So Patrick Macnee's in that one. He gets killed at the top of the staircase.
Right.
But he's on the set a bunch, and I was, I grew up watching the Avengers. Yeah. So, and that was a big deal for me working with Patrick Macnee. The funny thing about Waxwork that most people don't know, although they might if they've seen the commentary, is that when I read the script, I thought that the concept was interesting. I thought the writing was terrible. And Tony knows this, that the dialogue was terrible. It's supposed to be 6 kids in LA, and people were like, "Oi, mate, would you like a spot of tea when I sit next to the lorry?" And I was like, dude, this is all anglicized dialogue. There's no one in Los Angeles talks like this. I mean, this is pathetic. Like, do a little research about how LA kids talk. So my manager was like, "Why don't you go and just have a meeting with him? He's dying to meet you. He really wants to have a meeting with you." Little did I know it. I met Tony at a restaurant in LA, still there. It's called Hugo's. It's like 33 years ago. Hard to believe. Little did I know that Tony Hickox, the director, could sell ice to Inuit tribesmen. I mean, this guy he had an amazing strategy, which is he would say, "So what you think, blah, blah, blah." And I'd go, "Well, if I'm really honest with you," because I wanted him to sort of get annoyed and not offer me the movie so I didn't have to turn him down, because I was not going to do the movie. Sorry, that was my cat sneezing. And I said, "Well, but I was like, well, I really have kind of like problem number 1." And he'd go like this: "Oh, well, problem number 1, we solved that. We'll just to change it and this, that's done. What's the other problem?" And I go, "Oh, well, problem number 2 is that you have to get rid of the," he's like, "Done." So every problem I had, he just conceded. So it was very clever, because by the time I was done with problems, there weren't any left. so I didn't know, there was no way really for me to, it was kind of like, he's like, "Anything else?" And I was like, "No, I think that's pretty much about it." He's like, "Well, I guess you're doing the movie then." I was like, I guess I'm doing it.
It's funny. You brought up the dialogue in that movie, and I always thought it was rather strange, but I thought it was strange on purpose. I thought it was kind of like the way they made the dialogue in Heathers, the Christian Slater movie. No kids talked like the kids in Heathers did, like How Very and, all those lines that they used. So I thought it was kind of intentionally quirky, and that was kind of what made it attractive. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think it was just clumsy. And I mean, here's the thing. I'm great friends with Tony. He knows it was his first movie. He was learning. He hadn't really lived in America very long, so he's learning. It's like if I went to England and I'm trying to write British dialogue, it probably wouldn't go that great the first time. Actually, it would, because I'm quite good with the British. No, but it probably I'd be struggling through a lot of it. So anyway, the funny thing is, after the thing was over, I called my manager and he goes, "So how did he take it?" And I go, "How did he take what?" And he goes, "Turning him down." I go, "Oh, I'm doing the movie." He goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'm doing the movie." It's loaded with hot women, and he's a super cool guy, and I had a bunch of problems, and he's letting me write my dialogue, and it's all fine.
And you got to work with Bruce Campbell in part 2. That must have been cool.
Yeah, the funny thing is that when I worked with Bruce in, you got to remember that's 1991, and Bruce is still at that time still very much kind of a culty guy. Mm-hmm. He's the Evil Dead guy, and he knows that at that juncture. You could argue, some people would argue, he still is the Evil Dead guy, but he's done so many other things too. And he's in Briscoe County and whatnot. He's a super talented guy. But I was a big Evil Dead 1 and 2 fan. I'm not even sure Army of Darkness had come out. No, I think he just finished it. Mm-hmm. I think that the Army of Darkness is like 93, or maybe he's just started. He was probably writing it. So he was just Evil Dead 1 and 2 guy. And I mean, I thought both those movies were amazing. And I was a big Sam Raimi fan. And, he and Dick Miller, I've said this multiple times, are the only two people I've ever worked with who actually looked in person like cartoon characters. He looked like, he really did look like a cartoon character. It was bizarre. And a handsome cartoon character, but a cartoon character, everything, his features were just so kind of
pronounced.
Exaggerated and pronounced. Yeah. And we did a lot of in Waxwork 2, we did a lot of Tony was very good. If we did something funny, if Bruce did something funny, he's like, keep that, and if I did something funny, like the upside down book thing, I'm pretty sure I discovered that. I think I did it one time and it was upside down, and I was like, and then the next time, just for fun, I did the reading backwards, like like the book upside down. So that was cute. I mean, both of those movies were very fun experiences. The second one was very tiring though, because I was in almost every shot practically, and we had 2 units going at once, and we were working 6-day weeks and working in a place outside of Los Angeles called Vernon. It was really kind of not, it's very industrial, not nice place to film, and full of slaughterhouses and creepy and whatnot. So it was a kind of a schlep to go there in the morning at rush hour. And but yeah, those movies are, I would say I'm way more stunned at the Waxwork staying power than I am at the Gremlins staying power. I expect the Gremlins staying power, but I didn't expect people to come up to me with a Waxwork thing, a Waxwork. Oftentimes it's a VHS, just mine. I didn't expect that to happen. Was it 33 years later? That's a third of a century later.
Yeah, well, it's just such a great, fun popcorn horror flick. Joe, are you somewhere to be found, Mr. Ridgely? No. Okay. Well, Mr. Ridgely,
he's back.
If you were to be found, now would be a great time for my dear friend and friend of the show, lovingly called in my household Uncle Scott, Mr. Scott Schiaffo. Is he around? Oh, you speak. And there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Mr. Scott Schiaffo. Scott, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing? Zach, great to see you, man.
Thanks, man. How are you?
Good. I'm really enjoying hearing the stories. Quickly, Dave, if I will, just one thing I wanted to ask Zach about. A little while back on social media, you had posted the People mag. I think it was People with Molly Ringwald from the 80s, and you were teasing you were considering writing your memoirs. And I thought,
oh yeah,
are you doing it? You thinking of doing it? You really should. I think it would be phenomenal. I love reading, especially people came up at the same time I did generation-wise, to hear the stories. Just hearing you tonight, what you were sharing was wonderful stuff. You thinking of doing it?
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about doing it for a while. I have the first opening chapter written, like 7-8 very tight pages, just sort of almost as like a book proposal, because they always sort of want, when you do a book proposal, they want an opening chapter and then an explanation of where the book would go. And then obviously an explanation of, okay, well, if we do this book, who's going to buy this thing? So that's what you do in a book proposal. So in order to do the book proposal, I had to write the first chapter. So I wrote the first chapter, but I've never actually pursued the book proposal per se. I'm thinking more and more about it as I've had more time to think about it.
Yeah, it would be really, I want that. Just hearing your stories tonight, I was curious about, I know you were an East Coast guy, and coming up at that time, it was such a very different period in film and in New York. And I know you're joking about you were a club, clubbing. I guess it was around the time of the Club Kids as well.
I actually, sort of. I knew some of those Club Kids for sure, Michael Ailig and everything like that. I was much more 1985 to 1988 clubs. And then I moved to Los Angeles, where I then rather blissfully segued into the LA club scene, starting in 1988, all the way up until I left LA in 2003. So, I mean, a lot of my friends were and are still club promoters out in Los Angeles. So one of the benefits of that is, so your career probably suffered because you're having so much fun, but I probably had a solid 15 years of going to every restaurant and club that I ever wanted to in my lifetime. And it was LA in the 90s.
So it wasn't long after Gremlins that you became West Coast guy.
Yeah, I mean, I basically, I was going to Columbia. I wanted to get my degree. My dad was giving me a hard time. He was like, you better get that degree, God damn it. And I was like, basically like, trying to hang in there. And I got very close to it. And I was just getting so much work. I was like, this is ridiculous. I got to move out to LA. So I moved out to LA and, actually finished my last 2 semesters, one at USC and one at UCLA. So that's how I finished up my my college degree, is getting my last 2 semesters there. But it's not doing that 1 year is not enough to take away from the 3 years that I did at Columbia. So my diploma is still from Columbia, basically. But yeah, I moved out in '88 because I just felt like I was dying on the vine in New York. Especially since I was with an agency called Creative Artists and they didn't have a New York office. They still don't, which was probably maybe not the best audit, maybe not the best, it probably wasn't the best choice on my part, but I had Ron Meyer, who's like now the head of Universal, like flying to New York to try and sign me. So he was such a huge guy. He and Mike Ovitz, they were both at the time, if those 2 guys want you, you felt like you were an idiot to say no. Sure. So I did the weird thing of being a New York actor with just an LA agent, and didn't really work out that great.
Zac, the great special effects makeup man, Joe Castro, wanted to ask you, did you listen to Mars FM on LA radio?
Joe would have to tell me what station that was. I was more of a KLOS guy.
Oh, okay.
I listened to KLOS, and I listened to there was a metal station there called KNAC, which is I think 105.5 is like the home of hair metal. So like everything that was going on at Gazzari's and the Rainbow and the Roxy and the Whiskey, I mean, that was probably the most amazing thing, was being in Los Angeles 87, 88, 89 for the hair metal era, and also seeing the hair metal era end within 3 or 4 months with the Nirvana record coming out. I mean, it was literally like everyone was like spraying hair, and then the next thing you knew, 6 months later, everyone's dressed like Kurt Cobain. It was bizarre.
It's funny. Not many people know that Alice in Chains, which is one of the biggest alternative bands, along with Nirvana and Pearl Jam, they started off as a hair band in California. Scott, I know you have several more questions you want to ask Zac, but I just had one more question I want to ask him before I forget. You did a film called Nothing Lasts Forever with Bill Murray, and I don't think it ever actually got a proper release. But what can you tell us about what can you tell us about that film? And I heard a great story about you running into Mr. Murray during your college days later after shooting that film. Can you share those 2 things with us?
Well, it's a pretty epic story, but the super condensed version is that I did this movie with him, and we played. I was the hero, and he was my nemesis. He's sort of like the bureaucratic, jerky guy who's just decided that I'm a young, pretty guy, and he's going to make my life miserable. And so he kind of did this thing where, when we were on the set, he would be kind of methody with me. And so he would be very hot and cold with me. And some days he would be really aggressively unpleasant with me. Like he would just be like a dick. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand, this is 1982. This is right after Stripes. He's shooting Nothing Lasts Forever and Tootsie at the same time. Wow. So this is primo Bill Murray. And I was like, man crush. I mean, I just thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, And here he is, and he's being terrible to me. Like terrible. And then my sister comes on the set and he's like saying weird stuff to my sister and my mom. He's like, knows my mom's a shrink and is like tormenting my mom on this. I'm like, what is going on with this guy? You know, it's like my whole family was like, what? This guy's bizarre. So long story short, it's about a year later and I'm going to a history class at Columbia and I'm walking across the quad at 116th Street, and I see all these cameras and like the blue police do not cross sawhorses kind of things that are up everywhere. Mm-hmm. People are standing behind them watching, and they're shooting some kind of movie. And there is this hearse, and it's got this like ghost with a little round circle around it with a slash through it. I'm like, what is this movie? It's bizarre, you know? These people standing there in these outfits with these large guns. I'm like, this looks ridiculous. And then I look closely and I see that it's Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd was also in Nothing Lasts Forever with me. And so I was like, wait a second, you know, it's a year later, but I know these guys. Like I just spent 4 weeks with Bill Murray. You know what I mean? It's like, I know this guy. So I squeeze up to the police barrier. And, you know, there are cops there. It's New York City. There's crowd control. And I'm looking and stuff like that. And I'm fairly close to them. And when, and let me just say that Dan Aykroyd was the greatest, nicest guy like ever. So I'm not going to talk to Murray because he was so weird to me, but I would talk to Aykroyd. So I thought, well, I'll just say hi to Danny. He even had me call him Danny. Every time I see Aykroyd, I call him Danny because that's what he told me 38 years ago. He's the nicest person on the planet. So I raise my hand and I go, hey, Danny. And I guess hardly anyone calls him Danny except people who know him pretty well. So he knew to look as opposed to like Mr. Aykroyd. So he looks over like that and he nudges Murray, and Murray looks over and he sees me, and Murray's squinting and he goes like this. It's the kid. And I go, hey guys, like that. And Murray goes like this, come here. Waves me over. So I try to go under the sawhorse kind of thing. The cop goes, I'm sorry, young man, you can't go there. And Murray comes over and he goes, officer, it's okay. He's with us. He grabs me by the arm and he pulls me out under the sawhorse. And I talked to them for like maybe 10, 15 minutes in between shots. And, you know, Aykroyd was like, I heard you just worked with Steven. How'd that go? Because this was post Gremlins. I was like, it was great. And Murray was super nice and friendly. And I basically kind of realized it was all just kind of like an act. It was all, he was going to be he knew it was my first movie, and he's probably saw that I was in awe of him. And he was like, this kid's performance not going to work if he's like, I'm the villain and he's looking up at me like, hey, Bill. So he made me hate him. And you can see it in the movie. I don't like him in the movie, you know, at all. But then every time I've seen him after that, he's been super cool. And we even did a screening of Nothing Lasts Forever 2006 at Lincoln Center. And he showed up and he was sitting next to me, and someone asked him a question. He was talking about the movie, and then he turned around and he looked at me and he gave me a compliment. You know, he said something like, you know, a terrific performance like Zac did, considering how young he was. I almost fell through my chair.
Wow.
Like, Bill Murray just gave me a compliment? What planet is this?
I'm sorry that didn't go well. You would hope that working with your hero would have went better, but I could tell you stories that are very similar, so I get you. Scott, you had something you wanted to ask Zac about the View Askew universe, correct?
Well, I don't know so much it's a question as much as I want to just give you kudos on your performance in Madness in the Method. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I was looking for you. Dominic Burns, a mutual person we both know, was explaining to me a lot about the movie before it was released last year. I had gotten a chance to spend some time in London, and he was going on and on about, you know, you gotta, you know, look out for Zac. And you were so lost in the one character. I was like, I think it was after one of the first appearances. Like I didn't even realize that was you until afterwards. I was like, wow. I mean, you really were lost in that role, and it was wonderful. How did that come about that you got involved with Madness in the Method?
Well, I had done a movie with Dominic Burns before called Cut, which was a really trippy horror movie because it's all done in one shot, one 66-minute Steadicam shot. We rehearsed it like a play, and we shot it over 5 nights. We would do 2 takes per night, and they were this incredibly complicated setup. And we managed in the 5 nights, we managed to get 2 usable takes, and they picked one of the one that obviously they thought was the best one. So I had been working with Dominic since then, and wow. And so he's always trying to put me in stuff that he's doing. When you find someone you're simpatico with, people like to use you again and again and again. You see that with like Paul Thomas Anderson and Philip Seymour Hoffman and stuff like that. They have people have sort of like a repertory company that they work with, kind of like Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater. And so he just likes to work with me a bunch, and he just wanted to know if I wanted to do the part in Madness. The funny thing about the part in Madness is he asked me to do it first, and then he got an opportunity to get both Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain. So he gave my part away to Dean Cain. And I said to him, wouldn't it be funny if Jason has a dream about me being like, and I ask for the part, and Jason says, I've already given it to Dean Cain, because that's actually what really happened. So you want to talk about it being super meta, is that what happened outside the movie, we just stuck it in the movie.
That's awesome.
So, Zac, at the beginning of the show, you had mentioned of a current horror film that you were working on. Why don't you let us know about it?
Yeah. Well, the super quick plug is it's a like an anthology, which is all the rage now, and it's called Bad Candy, and I'm just sort of doing the there's just me. I'm doing the wraparound story. And the interesting thing about it is I play a radio DJ producer, and the guy opposite me who plays my best friend is Corey Taylor from Slipknot. And so I always like working with actors that are kind of non-actors, because they oftentimes bring something very special to the table. Like I said, like with Rowdy Piper. And Corey is obviously a very natural, gifted performer. He's, when you play Rock in Rio for 500,000 people, you're not going to be nervous on a set with 20 people watching you. And, he was never nervous. He was a real perfectionist, and he was a very, very cool. I maybe one time I just sort of threw a suggestion at him, and rather than sort of being like annoyed by it, he was like, oh dude, yeah, sure, dude, thanks, man. Super humble and cool. So I really like Corey a lot, and respect him, and I think people are going to really enjoy seeing the two of us together, because I felt like we had kind of a good chemistry. And I don't always feel that way, but I felt like he and I had some good chemistry. So it should be a cute movie. We shot it down here in Georgia, a little town called Milledgeville, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And we actually found this old abandoned 1978 bluegrass radio station and shot it in this dilapidated radio station. It's really, really gives the people are going to be like, that's an amazing set. And you'll be like, dude, that ain't no set. That's the real deal.
That's awesome.
That's the real deal.
When production value presents itself to us like a small independent film. How did you get involved in Hatchet 3? And do you have any cool stories about working on Hatchet 3?
Well, the funniest thing about Hatchet 3 is that, as you can see, I'm about 15 pounds overweight. But anyway, actors are so vain. We just can't help it. We see ourselves and we just go like this. Oh my God, I believe I look like that. But
I thought you looked great in the movie.
Thank you very much, Dave. The funniest thing about Hatchet 3 was I got an email out of the blue, and it said Hatchet 3 offer. And I swear to God, I thought it was from Amazon.com. You know how they're always like selling it?
To buy the movie.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like this. It said Hatchet 3 offer. I was like, I didn't see Hatchet 1 and 2, motherfucker. And click delete. You know what I mean? And I almost deleted it until I saw that it was from my agent. And I was like, what, Hatchet 3? And even then I went like this. Hatchet 3, like I hadn't even heard about Hatchet 1 or 2. Now they're going to offer me Hatchet 3. I was like, let's see how much money it is. Because, there's such a thing for those of you who are non-actors known as trash for cash. So I was like, hey, man, I'll do trash for cash. No problem. So the first thing that I do, which I always do, is I take a look at you. Thank you. That's very kind. I take a look at the producer and the director on IMDb and see their credits. And I go, oh, wow. Oh, look at that. Oh, wow. Look at Adam Green. Okay. BJ McDonnell. Oh, wow. Jeez, my God. Look at that guy. He's steady cammed everything. He's a steady cam for Michael Mann, steady cam for like everything. He's worked with the biggest people. So I was like, and steady cam operators and camera operators are no joke. They're deeply talented. If you're the best steady cam operator in America, or one of the 2 or 3, you're no joke. You're like legitimately deeply talented person. Talk about BJ McDonnell. So both of those, I was like, that's, pretty cool. I was like, you know what? It's probably crap, but I'm going to read the script anyway. And because I didn't know anything about Adam. So I picked up the script and I'm on page 10 and I'm laughing. And I'm on page 20. I'm like, this is really well written. And I'm looking at my part. My part's huge. I'm like, my part is arguably the lead. I thought it was going to be like some supporting part. And the absolute funniest thing is I'm like, you know what? It's finally a chance shooting in New Orleans. I love New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities. I want to go down there and I'm just going to pull a Dennis Quaid. I'm going to do a Cajun accent. I'm going to do a Cajun, go down to New Orleans and play a Cajun police officer. Get down to New Orleans, been practicing my Cajun accent. No one in New Orleans speaks with a Cajun accent. Very few people. Almost no one in New Orleans even has a Southern accent. I walk in someplace, I'm like, how y'all doing? People are like, hi, can I help you? I'm like, wait, this is wrong. Like, the accent is not really that thick unless you're hanging out with Aaron Neville, which actually I got a chance to do on a movie called Zandali, which we shot down there. But anyway, there's not a lot of accents. I was like, shit, I don't know what to do. I was kind of at a loss. And then I got introduced to Caroline Williams, who's from Houston. She's like, hey, darling, how you doing? You have a good time down here? And I was like, yes, I am. You're my ex-wife, aren't you? Well, guess what? I guess I'm from Houston now, too. And that's how I decided right on the spot that I was going to be from Houston, too. And I just spent most of my time with Caroline Williams. If she had a problem with it, I'd just listen to her, and then I'd pick up her speech thing like that. We do this, that, and the other thing. Next thing you know, I'm talking like this. Hatchet 3.
Oh, man, the stories are awesome. You really got to write that book, sir.
See, there is a method in the madness.
There you go.
Well, Zac, is there any,
yes.
Can you tell our fans and everybody watching tonight where they can find you?
Most certainly. The 2 things that I really focus on, I'm not really much of a Facebook guy. I'm much more of a Twitter guy and especially an Instagram guy. Although I try and do my Instagrams, I try and have them be kind of quality as opposed to quantity. I don't know whether I'm doing that, whether it's working or not, but I try and make every post kind of count. So they're both at ZWG, which are my initials, Zachary Wolf Galligan, at ZWG man, at ZWG man. Or you can just look me up. You can just look up Zac Galligan and you'll see, I'm pleased to say I finally got a blue check on Instagram because I had a bunch of people pretending to be me. Why you would want to pretend to be me, I don't know. But people were. So I got a blue check on Instagram and a blue check on Twitter. So you know that you're actually talking to me. Thank you, Kylie. It's very sweet of you. You know that you're actually talking to me. So you can see me on social media. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, Zac, I've been bugging you for weeks to do my show, and you finally gave in. And I want to thank you.
It took a quarantine to get me on your show, Madison.
There you go. I want to thank you for being so wonderful, so kind, and such a wonderful guest. And I hope to someday be able to work with you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Zac Galligan, thank you for joining us tonight.
Peace out. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate your questions.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Galligan. Wow, that was fun.
How awesome is that cat?
You know what's so funny, Joe?
What's that?
In successive weeks, we had the great William Sadler tell us how he shit himself on stage. And then we had great John McNaughton tell us unbelievable stories. And tonight we had none other than Zac Galligan himself tell us that Bill Murray was a schmuck. Now that's what I call entertainment, Mike. You don't find this. You just don't find this everywhere.
I agree.
Scott Meany, an interview just as interesting as his career. That's true. That guy's got to write that book, man. I mean, I of course I love my fellow actors and musicians, especially people who are near in my age range. But the guy's got so many great stories, you know.
Scott, you think maybe I could just take the compliment? Maybe he meant my interviewing skills were particularly good?
Oh, it can't be that. Kidding.
Libby's in the house.
Hello, Libby.
Hey!
This is me crossing Scott Schiaffo off my Christmas list.
I guess I'm no longer the featured occasional guest.
Scott, read that for me.
Scott, we love you. Thank you for coming back again tonight. You got it, Lance Wagner. Thank
Of course.
you.
Thank you, Scott. You're the best.
Oh, no, thank you, David. Really, I really,
Thank you,
really
Sean.
was happy to be part of the show with Zac because I can remember my first serious girlfriend. We went to Gremlins, and all I heard about was Zac after the movie.
Well, where do you see the lineup that we've had? Sam J. Jones, John McNaughton, Zac Galligan. Where do you see who the next two guests are? Hopefully you'll be joining me on those shows too, Mr. Schiaffo.
Okay, but Friday, do you have a show Friday?
I will confirm tomorrow's show, Friday show tomorrow, because the guest, the magnitude of guests that I'm working on is really unbelievable, and they're extremely busy. Even in this quarantine time, they're busy making the biggest movies in Hollywood as we speak. So he said he would do my show. He said he was going to do the show this Friday, and hopefully I'll get to put up the banner tomorrow that he will be joining us on Friday. If he's not, I'll just call up a friend and we'll have another icon.
I'm looking forward to it. Obviously. I'm going to dip down for a second, and you and Scott can close it out.
Sure. Well, Mr. Schiaffo, or as I call you in this household, Uncle Scott, thank you for joining us. I hope you're well. And do you have anything you want to part with?
Thank you for having me tonight because I really do enjoy me some Zac Galligan, and it was great to be part of the show along with him. He's a really interesting cat.
As are you, my friend. As are you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being my friend, my in real life, as somebody who I always can count on to get my back, and I'm not being corny. Thank you, Scott. You're the best. I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight for our special Wednesday night edition of The End of the Night. I'm either going to return this Friday night or a week from Friday. Just check your local Indie Brigade listings. And I want to thank, of course, the great legendary Zac Galligan for joining us tonight. And remember, no man with friends. See, I always mess up my own closing line. How pathetic is that? No man with friends will ever be poor. Good night, everybody, and I hope to talk to you guys soon.